Ray, and the purpose of these videos, if you've seen the last one, is to really give a good understanding or try to provide some tips and different techniques for recording hard rock and metal in Studio One. As you know, there's a lot of great stuff out there right now in Studio One, and just wanted to provide some different techniques, methods that work for me recording in a studio setting for using Studio One and using a lot of the plugins that are provided in Studio One, as well as some of the additional plugins that you can add, as well as some of the Slate stuff and Universal Audio stuff. In our last video, we talked about laying your drum tracks and the different ways that you can prepare your drums, and the way I do it for getting ready to write songs. And again, kind of what I do is I get the riff in my head and I'll practice it and get kind of the intros, the riff, the chorus, the different parts, maybe the bridge, and start laying those down. And I'll use either my video recorder, or I will use Studio One or my Electro Harmonix 360 Nano Looper to capture how I just kind of getting those first few tracks there in my head. And then what I start doing is, there's a couple different ways you can do it, as we talked about. You can match your drum beats to the tracks that you've laid using, say, Easy Drummer, using the tap tool, which will match the beat. You can kind of drag it in and set the tempo and do it that way. Or a lot of times what I'll do is, once I determine just from playing what I think the tempo is best, I'll play around with my drums a little bit and find where that beat fits, where that tempo is, and then I'll start to lock it in and adjust my track. So what we're going to talk about today is bass. As I get my tracks in, and you can remember from the last video, I talked a lot about I'll make several tracks, multiple tracks of my guitar playing of different amps, different cabs and stuff, to see how it sounds, and then delete the ones I don't, keep the ones I like, and then eventually keep about 4 tracks. A lot of people will do, as you've probably found by now, they call it dual tracking or quad tracking. Some artists have even done more. They layer the tracks to make the tone thicker, and so a lot of times what you can do is really bulk those up, panning 2 left, 2 right. And here's a little trick, something else. Somebody once asked me, can you just duplicate the recording that you've done now? And the answer to that is you could, but it doesn't sound very good. It doesn't add the little nuances that the individual tracks that you record provide. I've done it before just to hear what it sounds like, and then you can't even hear it. It doesn't thicken anything up, doesn't do anything better. Doing the individual tracks, 1, 2, 3, 4 different tracks in Studio One, just really adds that thicker sound and really improves the quality of the tone of your guitars. We'll talk more about that in later tracks, and things I want to go through in later tracks is using different amps, and how I really like to mix Mesa and Marshalls. It gives it a really great tone. I think there's something about the heavy, low Mesa tone and that kind of more brighter Marshall tone that really mixes well together. So a lot of times I'll do 2 Mesas and 2 Marshall, and just gives a really good tone. So anyway, good tone. So anyway, back to this. I have a couple different bass guitars that I like to use. My favorite for recording is the Schecter Raiden 4. It just has a really good tone. It's just a great bass to play, and I've really kind of grown fond of it. You get these things actually really cheap. I think I got this one at Guitar Center for a couple $100. I think new they were 400 or something like that, but you can really get good deals on them, especially if you get them used, which I always highly recommend. If you can get good gear, it's not too busted up, inexpensive, and used is always a good thing. So a couple different ways that you can record the bass. I used to always record the cabs. I would plug my bass into the cabs and record the cabs, and then fight through having to go through the recordings and adjust the sound. And a couple good producer guys and techs and stuff like that told me, you just record through the DI, run your bass through the DI, and do it through Studio One, and why mess with the cab? And you'll find a lot of other guys out there too that feel the same way. You may still see some people that like to record through the cabinet and running it through the amp, but why? I've never really found any benefits to recording through, miking a bass cab. But I do think that running through, and I sometimes when I'm recording the bass, I will use you can use some reverb delay and maybe a compressor, a couple different effects. I find that actually I like to record my signal dry into Studio One and then add my effects after. Use my compression, my EQ, some reverb, and anything else you want to add after that. It just seems to make it a much better signal, and you can tweak it better. If you add effects before, pre-running into your recording, you can't take it back out. So you spend a lot of time EQing, and I'm a big proponent of not having to add much to the track once you've recorded it. So we're going to talk today about the bass guitar. We'll talk about editing the tracks a little bit. We'll spend a little time in Studio One messing with those drum tracks we did in the last video, and guitar tracks. Okay, what I like to do now, and in the last video we talked about laying those drums down, and remember, it's really kind of just finding what works best for you, and that's kind of just how I do it, is really finding what are the different parts that I want. And again, if you have Studio One, the benefit of using Studio One is you can find the different parts of the drum track that you want. Here is one of the song creator functions where you can really kind of sample different parts of the song, and or different parts of the drums, different verses, pre-chorus, different parts of the song, and then just drag them in to the song creator. And as you can see, here's an example of one where I built different parts of it. And I even tell you the truth, I'll even cheat sometimes. I'll use Easy Drummer to build the song and create the different parts, your intro, your verses, your chorus, all the different parts. And then as I'm practicing my guitar, I'll use my Roland kit and practice over and over until I can play it. And I run, again, as I mentioned before, I run my Roland drum kit in through PreSonus, and it triggers the set in here, which is really cool. Sometimes I can play the tracks well, sometimes it's not so well, and so sometimes it's a mixture of Easy Drummer and my Roland kit. Very cool little feature here to build it. You can see over here, I've created different tracks of guitars. I talked about in the last video. I like to, once I get a good drum, the parts of the drum the way I think I really want them to go, then what I'll do is go in and lay down different guitar tracks. Really what I'm trying to do, and again, you can do it however you want. Some people like to do the drums, then the bass, and then the guitar. For me, what works is I like to find the guitar and the drum. I like to mix them up because I've got those riffs in my head. I know how I want the verse to go. I want to have the chorus to go. I start playing with it and playing with it until I really get it to come together. And once I get it to a point where I'm like, okay, I think I know everything how I want it to go, I'll start laying down my different tracks. And you can see here, what's also nice is I can name the different combinations. I like to try different, as I mentioned before, I like to use Marshall. I like to use Mesa a lot because of the low end of the Mesa and kind of the brighter end of the Marshall. You can hear I'm using a Mesa RA100 with a PRS guitar with 4x12 vintage 30s. Here I'm using a Studio in the RA. Here's 2 tracks with the Rectifier with an Explorer. Here's one with a JCM 800, and then here's one with my 1987 Marshall, and here's one with my traditional. Here's one with my Explorer. And so 2 tracks of the RA, 2 tracks of the Rectifier, and 2 different Marshalls. And what I'm really doing is just trying to find out what works best. Each one of these tracks is pan as a pan left. This one's pan right, pan left, pan right. And so what you can start to do is really kind of hear how the song is going to come together. And I like to test it out and hear how things are going. Got my drum track, and then what I'll do is I'll start to listen. This is pan left, my Mesa RA. There's one pan right, and then I'll listen to how it sounds with the Marshalls. And then listen how does it sound with the Rectifiers. And of course, this is all still done without any of the edits. These are just the raw tracks themselves right here. No editing has been done. So you still have time to go in and kind of mess with the mixing if you want. But at this time, these are just the raw tracks of the guitars and the drums. And so what I'm doing at this point is once I start to get it to a point where I know where I want my, I kind of get an idea of these are the guitars, that I want to use. These are the amps I want to use. This is, you know, the different cabs and the speakers I want to use. Then I'm ready for my bass tracks. And so, of course, I'll go up and I'll create a track here, and then I'll get ready for my bass track. So let's go ahead and record a bass track. At this point now, what we have done is we have created our bass track, and something I probably should have mentioned before. With the different guitars, I won't keep all of these different guitars here, and I have some even more down here, but as I've been talking about, I like to record different amps, different guitars and stuff to hear which ones I like best. So I won't normally have 6 guitars in my mix. I'll usually have just 2 or maybe 4 panned, as I said before, left and right. With bass, we record it up the middle and leave it up the middle. Bass guitar sounds best in the middle. Remember, with the different parts of your song, your arrangement. Guitars may sound good panned left and right, but bass just has a much better effect and sound left up the middle, and it helps distinguish a song better. I'm sure there are people out there that could tell you exactly why bass sounds best up the middle and not panned left or right. But I've just been told that's the way, the best way to do it. So another way you can do it is, because this is a metal song, or, you know, hard rock metal song, I like to double track. Now you can record 2 different basses if you want. I find that doesn't work that well. And I remember before we said with guitar tracks, we don't like to just simply duplicate them. With bass, you can. Bass, I can actually go up in here and you can duplicate track, which will just add a track, or you can duplicate the complete track, and what that's going to do is add this duplicate bass track right here. So now we have, and of course it's going to be, you know, it's peaking a little and it's a little heavy right now because it's just a, you know, straight recorded track, no effects, nothing in it yet. But you can see now we've got our bass guitar tracks recorded, and what I will do with these tracks, I will go in and edit my tracks here. You can see we've created these 2 tracks, and what I will do is add inserts in here to make them a little different. I'll either go into Ampire or use a different VST, but I'll add a little bit of grit to this one, a little gain, a little distortion perhaps. This one here, I'll do it a little bit different. So you have the 2 tracks, but they will be a little bit different. And that's the way it'll fatten up the tune. And again, with this being a little bit of a heavier track, I don't want to lose my bass in the mix. You know, with just the 1 track, which you can do. So having these 2 tracks just helps fatten things up. I can lower my volume a little bit, but my levels and my thickness of the tune will still be there. So again, so far at this point now, we've got our drum track pretty much where we want it, close to it. We've got different guitars where we want. We'll pick which ones sound best when we start to get, you know, listening to everything with the bass in it. So, you know, if we want to hear our So at this point now, again, bass, guitars, and our guitars here in the mix. And what we'll do in the next video is start talking about how, you know, selecting the guitars that we want and starting to edit our mix and start to pull it together. So if you have any questions or anything you want to know, let me know, and I will include it in the next video. And definitely appreciate you watching, and thank you very much.